So what is happening now? People who have filed in UK can no longer sell their products in EU because UK walked away from the European Union. So now they're setting up their own procedures and they are going through that, which still, by the end of this year, they will be fully separated from European Union.
Welcome to CMC Live. This is the show where we discuss CMC regulations and guidances simplified through real-life experiences and risk-based advice. Each episode, we speak with subject matter experts as well as other leading industry authorities. With your host, Ed Narkey.
Okay, welcome everyone to CMC Live. Today we have a special new guest, and joining us here again, as always, Miranda and Brian. Today we have Amber Sheriff on the podcast. Amber is a regulatory affairs and quality assurance expert specialist here. She recently joined our group here at DSI supporting that. She's actually joining us this morning from Chicagoland area this morning, worked at Baxter Healthcare, Acorn, Marathon Pharma, et cetera. Today we're going to be talking about a few things. Regulatory pathways in the European Union is kind of the overarching subject. Some experiences around centralized and decentralized filings for our listeners, Amber. And also Amber will be talking a bit about Brexit and some of the EU filing issues and concerns there. So Amber, let's get into this episode, starting by first going into some of the background here, how you get started in regulatory and get your thoughts on some of these things. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I really appreciate it. If you want to hear my experience has been pretty long and intense. So I've worked in the pharma industry for 25 plus years. Started with drug development and all the way to regulatory quality, all the way now. I am basically a subject matter expert in regulatory strategies, filings, submissions, process, you name it, I've done it.
Okay, so some of the experiences that you've had, I mean, we had somewhat recent experience with some of these things in Europe. Can you talk to us a little bit about the mutual recognition process versus decentralization, centralization procedures, national procedures, some of those things, and maybe highlight some of the areas around CMC to be thoughtful of?
So in principle, there are three procedures for obtaining market authorization in EU. One is the mutual recognition procedure. The second one is the decentralized, and then the third one is the centralized procedure. The differences between these three procedures is the mutual recognition. Basically submit to the country, and you have your reference member state. You submit it over there, and once you get the approval through there, you go to the other states and you get separate approvals. So it's a separate mutual. And once you get the mutual recognition, you can take that and you can apply to the other states and the member reference states, and you can get the approval over there.
So Amber, just for my own benefit, once you make that application and in that mutual recognition, can you then take that same filing content and submit it to the different states, the different member countries?
Yes, you can. In a way, you can repeat that, and it is called repeat procedure. So you can take that and go to separate states and you can ask them for that. How it also works is also it takes time, but basically that is the main way because they are mutually recognized. So you get one and they agree on that, and you can go through the other one. You submit it separately and you get approval of that. So you basically target the countries that you want.
Oh, I see. Oh, and are there separate fees for each as well?
I think there are slightly separate fees for each of them. Yes. And it can be done also simultaneously, where you have the reference, you finished off this and you have already aligned that I'm going to now I've got it. My reference number state was Germany, and then you go to France and you go to Spain. If you've already targeted these 5 countries that I want to get approval on. So that's the way. So yeah, you choose one recognition country as a recognition procedure to follow that.
And that becomes the template effectively for filing in other countries. Okay, understood.
The centralized procedure is somewhat different, where if you go to the centralized procedure, you get approval in all 27 EU countries. And there are other three, Norway, Iceland, and another country that also are agree to it. So you can get an approval in all of those countries together. So that's the main difference between centralized and decentralized procedure. The decentralized procedure, however, there are some products that can be approved for that, and some that are not. You have to fall into that category for it to be included in that procedure. So there are again some differences, like aid medications and all of those things, vaccines. They can fall into that, or you already have an approval for the product in there. So, and you need to follow the same, like we have the generic same pathway, then you can fall into that decentralized procedure. So there are some products that can be included and that can not be included.
So that's a great point. Actually, I always had questions around this. So the centralized procedure is mandatory for certain types of products, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then what type of products would those be? Mainly, you said, I think you mentioned a few with the biotechnology processes, any recombinant. You mentioned immunodeficient syndrome type products, cancer, neurodegenerative disorders. So I guess a follow-on question, besides the definition for mutual versus decentralized and centralized, and there's a pretty good description of those on the European agency's website and some of the protocol and process. Some of the effects on the CMC development, drug development in that area, is there anything that you can speak to, in regards to that? Can certain things be delayed or discussed differently? Could some of the information that you use in discussions with the US FDA be used?
So one of the things that I would say is, with the EU, we have to just keep in mind that the more we go ahead and engage them upfront with the scientific advice meetings or any of those meetings, it's more helpful than going ahead and saying that, keeping it till the last minute. So the minute you are thinking of a project or a product or whatever it is, have a scientific advice with them. Tell them what you have initially and ask them the questions, and that becomes the process. And you also have to go ahead and in that process, basically tell them your timeline when you are thinking of, when you are going to be submitting it, so they become engaged upfront.
I have some just general questions. The difference between regulations, when you're talking drug development, FDA versus Europe, I've always looked at it, there's a different mentality. There's sort of a top-down versus a bottom-up review and discussion. Can you talk to maybe some of that, maybe things to be aware of, if you're simultaneously looking to file in the Europe as well as in the US?
With Europe, if you have some of the products that if you get an approval in Europe, there are testings that you need to do for EU. So if you are developing a product and you basically have both, you want to target both US and EU, set up in place the testing standards that you basically test the product for EU and US. So those products, the components, the API should all be compliant for EU and US also. That's the main difference that people forget, and then they want to add up in there, and then they come back and then say that you haven't tested it per EP requirement. So as far as that's done, then it becomes easier, because the same NDA that you have submitted in US, you can take that and you can submit it for MAA. There are certain differences, very slight differences, that if you, in the CMC sections mainly, that you have to write in the format that they want. Other than that, you can take this and you can submit it over there, as long as the testing and all the requirements are met upfront.
Okay, any specific differences or need or requirements?
And basically, it's the same standards of testing, that you meet the standards of EU, ISO standards, all those things. So nothing major in there.
How about any additional need for like stability or additional specifications? Is it regional?
If you meet the FDA requirement for stability, then you are fine with EU. The one major differences I've seen is basically we do the PPQ when later afterwards, after we have gotten the approval and we're ready to market. In both of my products that couple of products that I've submitted to EU, they want the PPQ done before. So they do want that. And that's one of the things that we have basically submitted along with that.
Sure. Yeah. So I know Brian has a lot of questions around the centralized procedure. Brian, did you want to bring in any more of those that we chew on sometimes?
Well, yeah. I mean, so when you're submitting the MAA, is it a multinational panel that reviews it? Or are there certain countries that handle certain aspects of the filing?
You choose the reference member state, that you choose the one that you want to. It's be it Germany, be it France, be it whatever. And so once you use that reference member state, the others are also rapporteur and co-rapporteur. They are also from the other countries that can be chosen too. So they are in the centralized procedure rapporteur and co-rapporteur. The co-rapporteur are the other countries, one of the other countries who would be participating in the review. And based on that, once they review it and they give you your assessment, that's based, whatever is given to you, you respond to that, and that's what is given the approval on. So it's the reference member state is the main one.
Got it. Okay. So for me, a lot of our clients come with defined budgets and timelines, and as you can imagine, they want to get the most out of the most economical path to filing they can possibly find, and that's our job, is to help them get to that point. Now, if it seems to me, and listening to you describe the various types of filings, that there's clear advantages over a centralized filing in terms of approvals, time to market, everything like that. So are there a criteria that has to be satisfied in order to be able to apply and to perform a centralized filing?
If it meets the requirement of what the centralized procedure is for, then definitely you can file it. But there are some certain requirements that you have to go ahead and follow for that. Right now, what we have, basically, from my experience, I have gone through both centralized and decentralized procedure. And for the centralized procedure, it is easier to go ahead and get the approval. And there are criteria. Some of the criteria you engage them and you send a letter of intent. As long as they say, yes, you are fine with this, you go with that. You do have to send a letter of intent and engage them ahead of time. So from the time that you're ready to submit, you have to engage them 7 months before. European Union do not meet like FDA. We cannot just send them and say, okay, we are submitting it this. And they have certain time frame where they meet. And once a month, everybody gets together and they look at what applications are coming in and what they are. So they need time upfront. So if I'm thinking of submitting something in 7 months, I will have to engage them, tell them this is what my plans are, and they will give you a slot to say, okay, that's the time frame that you can submit. And if you are not going to meet that timeline, then basically you have to inform them that I am not going to be able to meet the timeline. I'm going to be slipping. Can I go ahead and go to the next month or whatever, how much time frame you need? Most cases, they agree, but if they book full and they have given that time to somebody else, they will tell you that no, not now, maybe the month later or something like that. So that's the other thing. Although they're 12 months, they don't meet all 12 months. There are times that they take off during the time of Christmas or something, so they don't go ahead and do that. There are 11 times that they'll meet in a year. 2 of the months is, I think it's the August to July timeframe. They go on vacation, and then you will not be able to get anything from them. So you have to be working with them. So this is the other criteria with the European Union, that they have specific timeframes, and it's all set up, the timeframe, you know it. Procedures are much easier, not like with FDA where we do not know when we are going to get approval. They have timeframes which they meet. If they say they're going to give you this assessment in 80 preliminary responses in 80 days, they will. And then you get it in 120, your assessment over there, and then it's 180 days. So all those times are set. And you know that you are going to get an approval, or as long as you have satisfied the requirements. Now, if you need more time in between to respond to them, you can request and say that, I will not be able to go ahead and submit it in 3 months, but can I go ahead and submit it in, not 6 months or something? And they will be fine with that. You need to be in direct contact with them.
So in that regard, it is a lot different from the FDA, but it really comes down to planning, effective planning, looking at your calendar.
Effective
Right.
planning is the key, because then basically you know when you're going to get the approval, and you will know when you would be able to market. So those are the things, the main difference that I see in there. Now with the European Union trying to go ahead and set their headquarters in Amsterdam, they have, but there are some slight delays in there. They, not by much, but by a week, which in most of the cases was never expected. But now I do see that some of the things that they are delayed by a week or around a week. If they say this week, so it's not right on that day, but it's the week following that or so. Before they were earlier also, now that's not so.
So now looking at the climate of things, my experience has been with the MHRA and really as a driver in our filings. Now you've got Brexit and the impact of Brexit on the EU. So just when I was about to understand the EU and how everything works, Brexit comes along. So would you mind just providing some insight on the impact of Brexit and what that means for people that are still filing in the UK? How is it done? What's changed?
So what is happening now, people who have filed in UK can no longer sell their products in EU because UK walked away from the European Union. So now they're setting up their own procedures, and they are going through that, which still, by the end of this year, they will be fully separated from European Union. Their approval is separate than what you will get from the EMA. When you get the approval from EU, you can sell it in all 27 countries, or you can go ahead and follow the procedure from mutual recognition and go to the other countries and keep on adding over there. They will be recognized over there. Not so much in UK. They're separate now. If you had an approval in EU, you may have to go back and submit it, or again in UK. That is what I'm hearing. Nothing is clear now because guidance is still coming out. And from what I heard earlier this September or so is that they are coming out with some guidances that are talking about them following somewhat of the EU procedure, but then again, some standalone procedures for UK only. So the guidances are going to be defined pretty soon.
So again, now you've got additional fees, you've got additional timelines to consider. It's a little bit more complicated. Some of us remember the days before the EU, so it's going to be a little bit like it was, but okay, good to know.
So whatever you were following in MHRA, it is going to be applicable to EU right now. You can still follow the same path, but for UK, it's going to be separate. That's the other thing that since the scientific people a lot of them were in UK, and they were the major part of it since this EMA was based in UK, in London. So that's one of the reasons when they moved to Netherlands, they lost a lot of the consultant of the people who were subject matter expert. So you can still, if you have a scientific advice that you took from the MHRA, you can still submit it to EU, but I think it's going to be a third party, a consultant or something like that. So it's not going to be the major, you still have to go for the scientific advice to the EU to get their approval to say that, is this the right pathway or not?
So Amber, overall, I started off back in the day doing some light stuff for Europe and et cetera, but that's a long time ago. A lot of changes happened. So the way I look at it now, I before Brexit even, centralized procedure seemed to be make most sense. What's the benefits, right? So everyone gets authorization at the same time. There's a collective safety monitoring, so all the information's coming in one thing, right? Everything was in standard language and et cetera. I'm sort of kind of stepping back. What would be the advantage to do a decentralized or mutual recognition? And that may have changed with the Brexit situation, but what are some of the advantages of, if you're even eligible? I know centralized, if you're certain criteria, we mentioned this earlier, but what would be the advantages of doing a mutual recognition? Just not familiar with it. Is it just a little bit easier, a little bit more fluid?
Yeah, a little bit easier also. And you're focusing on one country. So if you want to just market in one country, then you basically want to go with the mutual recognition and then take your time going through the other countries getting the approval over there. Instead of marketing in all the European countries, just market in one country first and see how it goes. Then start adding those, because the fee are not that high, but and they are mutually recognized. So you have already gotten approval. So it's easier in that way. A lot of people go that way also.
Is there a chance that you can enter through the mutual recognition a country that has a little bit less requirements for CMC?
I think people have their own ideas on which country is easier and which is not. I find that, sometimes for one product, it all depends on the reviewer too, naturally. Some countries are open to it and some asks you questions. So I would not be able to say that this country is easier or that country is easier. It depends on the reviewers. It depends on our people who are reviewing and how much experience they have, all of those.
So on the same thought then, is there many regional requirements that you notice that are pretty, transparent depending on the country? Maybe somebody's looking for more stability or somebody's looking for something specific around compliance. Is there any examples that you've come across in the last few years where you've seen certain countries, kind of focusing on certain areas of drug development?
Not so much. They basically, if they're following the standards that they have set, all the countries are following the same standards, the ISO standards, so there are not much differences as long as you meet those.
It used to be different. I think right in the early stages of EU, you started to see some of the nuances with, the member nations. And for example, in the EU, it was always, cleaning protocols, cross-contamination, things like that on the CMC side. And they always got expected questions about that. And I know with our experience early on with the French, it was stability questions and challenges. And I think, this is years ago. So I would imagine over time, the EU finally has become a bit of a more standardized state.
Especially the stability part of it, they have come out with a lot of the stability protocols and all of those things. And so with the stability, if you follow their guidelines and you're doing all of those, then they are fine with it. There are questions like, and most of the questions, if you're following it, you will be able to clarify and clearly answer them. So it's not that difficult. But basically, we have to follow the guidances that they have put in there. The Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, whatever, all of them, that as long as you follow their quality and the stability guidelines, you're okay. But there are also specific product that same way as FDA goes ahead and says that, that this is the guideline for this product. This is the guideline for that product. I can't take the names of the products, but there are specific products. And if you find that you are falling into that category, you have to follow that to the nail. They will ask you questions. And in those cases where you have some of those kind of products which have particular guidances, it's very beneficial to have a scientific advice meeting with them and ask your questions in there. Give them a little bit about your product, provide the briefing package and ask the questions. And they will give you really detailed answers as to what they are expecting.
So Amber, just curious, any thoughts on where things are going? If we woke up, we all fell asleep for 5 to 8 years and we woke up, where do you see the whole process going with Europe, post-Brexit, some of the procedural stuff? Any thoughts? So let's just hypothetically say we all fall asleep for 5 to 8 years and wake up. Where do you see the process and the way drugs are regulated going? And is there anything that you see as a trend that could make, take precedence to become the new normal for the future process?
The new norm, I think, between both the mutual recognition that is basically between FDA and EU, I see that coming as more and more becoming a norm. Now you see between the FDA and the EU, there is a mutual recognition where if you basically have, for the CMC purposes, I'll give you an example. If you have a plant that FDA has basically gone and looked at and they find that in compliance, EU is taking that and saying, okay, fine, so those are the things I think we are going to be merging together and we're going to rely on each other a lot more than before. If EU has looked at the plants and then FDA looks at it and it says, okay, fine, we will go ahead and give our approval based on that. So I think there is going to be a mixture between both the EU and the FDA working together to bring the product to the market earlier than, and not stopping at the things. I think COVID is another example that has brought this up to everybody's attention, because you see a lot of the traveling cannot be done. So if you rely on everybody to be going there, I think either they're going to be doing virtual or they're going to be going ahead and relying on each other's expertise and agreeing to that.
So do you see any trends in drug development in EU, given the current situation? Do you see over time anything evolving other than the collaboration between EU and the FDA?
Nothing brings to my mind that I can see that there is a trend, but I would say that they are basically keeping their timelines. So people are going to Europe more and more because it's becoming, in a way, much easier to get the approval when you have a time set and say that you are going to get approval in 210 days or whatever not, given that you've done everything. Where do you think you would go to? First, Europe. And then after that, the next people go to. Once you have the European approval, it becomes easier to go to Canada because Canada accepts the EMA approval. So once that's done, so people are also trying to go ahead and do that, get the EMA approval first, and then go to Canada. And then lastly, it's the US. So I've seen that trend a lot recently. I think also if you look globally, a lot you will see that EU is a lot more countries from outside are coming to Europe applications, bringing the applications over there first and getting the approval over there, and US is second after that. So people from the countries like India, the UAE and Asia, from there, you'll see their products being approved in EU first. I've seen that trend also.
So a lot of our clients are on a shoestring budget, we call them. So going to EU, would they benefit from a centralized procedure or decentralized? I know that there's fees for each.
Because once you get the approval, you get it in all 27 countries, including Norway, Iceland, and I think Lithuania or something like that. So there are three other countries that come along with it. So the filing fees aren't extravagantly different. So if they wanted to try EU, it wouldn't be a stretch budget-wise to go centralized.
And the difference is you've got the burden now to market and launch in those countries because you've gotten approval. I mean, it depends on the timing for those activities, I guess, weighs into that decision. Yeah.
Amber, anything you want to talk to us about, that people should know about Amber? Any great stories about historical, working in regulatory, any things you can share that might resonate with anyone growing into the regulatory space?
So one of the things, basically with EU, like I said, if you are planning on a submission, just be aware that they are not there for the summer. So if you're thinking that you're going to get the approval in September or August, well, you better think twice. You probably are not going to get it if there are any questions or delays or any of those things. So you have to work around that. And that has happened with us, where we basically thought, okay, well, if we miss June, doesn't matter. We'll just go to July and we'll ask them, can we submit it in July? Well, it does not happen that way. So you have to keep those timings for Europe, because they are very standard. It's not like FDA, where we think we can go ahead and slip a month and submit it and they will take it. And it's not the same case as that.
That was really hard for me. Yeah, my first encounter with working with it was a German company, and August was essentially just not on the table. I mean, it really
not on the table, right? It's not on the table.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
A little bit of December too, but what they do is they basically try to have 2 meetings in November to kind of offset that for December. So which is good. But the August is off the table. And not only that, if you have people working over there, things are closed. So if you have a manufacturing site over there, if you have API manufacturer over there, you're trying to get some documents, you have to be cognizant of the fact that Europe closes down July and August, and most of the people,
It really does.
yeah. So it impacts your application, it impacts your timeline, because you cannot get the information from them to even if you're filing a US application. So we have to be very aware of that and keep that in mind. In US, we tend to forget that because, we are working here 12 months, however you want to call it. But basically, that's one of the things that I find, and I've had numerous examples of that where we had to kind of go ahead and tell them upfront, by the way, my application is, I need this information over here. I know you are going to go on vacation, so will you have a substitute for you somewhere? So this is with the manufacturing sites or with the API manufacturer, having that conversation with them upfront and making sure that I have somebody over there. Because if my timing is such that I am getting an assessment and I need responses from them, I need somebody there to be able to respond to them. Otherwise, I won't meet my timeline.
Well, and I think that August slowdown, I think it even predated the EU, though, because I think that was the trend in Western European countries, which was August. I know Italy honors the same thing. It's on holiday. France, absolutely, they're on holiday.
Yes. Yes, they're on holiday.
Yeah, you have to respect it. Absolutely.
That's not something that we think about when we are in the US. It's like, okay, you take your vacation when you take it. So it's not a whole country shut down like that. So.
Okay, so in principle, there's 3 defined procedures to obtain approval for products in Europe, and we discussed reviewed a few of these procedures on the podcast today. Decisions based on, will depend on the nature of your active substance, a couple other things, target indications, even history of the product and your marketing strategy. Amber, thank you again for joining the podcast. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Miranda.
Thanks for listening. To read the full show notes for this episode, which include a summary, timestamps, and any links mentioned in this episode, please visit dsinformatics.com/podcast. There you'll find the information from this episode and any past episodes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a rating and a review at ratethispodcast.com/CMC Live. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.